Hi everyone, this is WWD4 and you are most welcome for it. Last video we talked about the measures of central tendency, the mean, the median and the mode. Today we want to see how can we get the mean of a data set using Excel, and we are going to see 5 different ways how we can calculate the mean of a data set using Excel. Let's switch on to it and we start from number 1. So the arithmetic mean is also known as the average, and it's got by getting the sum of the values divided by the counts of the values. So we are having the same data set that we saw last video showing pupils pocket money. So I'm going to click on cell B3. All formulas in Excel start with an equal sign, so equals to sum. We're going to first start by getting the sum. Tab to select it. I'm going to sum all these values here, the amount, and when I hit enter, you can see the sum is $75. So these amounts are in dollars, so let me first indicate it here, dollars. So let me click here, equals to count. Let me also count it, tab to select it, highlight the amounts, enter. Now you can see the count of 5. So let's see, equals to up arrow to get the sum, divide by up arrow to get the count. When I hit enter, we get the average of $15. That means on average, pupils from that particular school owns a pocket money of $15. So that's actually the first way how you can get the average in Excel. So let's see also how we can get it using the average function. I'm going to click on this cell, do equals to average. When I see it highlighted in blue, I hit tab. This average function works well if your range is having numbers, because the average function is actually programmed to ignore text. So I'm going to highlight the range like this, and when I hit tab, you can see we are getting an average of $15 also. Now there is also another function in Excel called average A. That's average ending with A. The average A function actually do consider text, but it evaluates a text to 0. So when your dataset is having text and you want to consider all the data points, you better use the average A function. The average A function also considers logical tests like true and falses. It evaluates false to 0 and it evaluates true to 1. So text and false is evaluated to 0 and then true is evaluated to 1 by the average A function. We're going to see an example later on, but for now let's just see how it works. Equals to average, but this time with A, tab to select it. When I highlight the range and hit tab. Now the first way how you can get the average in Excel is by using the aggregate function. Equals to aggregate. See it highlighted in blue, you hit tab. You can see all these functions are actually inbuilt in aggregate function. There are actually 19 of them, but the one we want is the average. Now let me first move these screen tips somewhere here. Now what we're going to use today is actually the second one here. So it needs the function number, the options, and then the reference. So our function number is actually these numbers you are seeing here. The one we want is the average. So if I see the average highlighted in blue, I can either double click to put the function number of 1 there, or I can simply type 1 and then comma. When it comes to the options argument, it has all these inbuilt options to ignore whatever you want to ignore. But for our case, let's say ignore nothing. I'm going to double click to put 4 there, or simply type 4, comma. Now it comes to the last argument now, reference. There's reference 1, reference 2. I'm simply going to highlight my reference. And when I hit tab, you can see we're getting the same average. Another way to get the mean of a data set is to use the database function, DAVERAGE. Let's see how it works. Equals to DAVERAGE. Tab to select it. The DAVERAGE function has 3 arguments. The database, that's your entire table. Field, that's which field you want the average to be calculated from, and then the criteria. Now if you know how to use advanced filter in Excel, the database function actually works almost the same way. You need to put your criteria somewhere where you will refer to. So let's start. The database is our entire data set, so I'm going to highlight including the field names. I'm going to highlight this, comma. The field is which field you actually want the average to be calculated from. For our case, it's the amount field. So I'm going to put the amount in text. Anytime you're putting a text in a formula, you need to put it in double quotes. So open quotation. I'm going to type amount and then close quotation, comma, and then the criteria. you need to put your criteria aside. I put the field names, and then below it I've left it empty. Now if you want to put any criteria, you need to type it below the field names, but for our case I've left it empty because I want to get the average of the entire amount filled. So I'm going to close my bracket, and when I hit enter, you can see in all 4 situations I'm getting the same answer. Let's scroll to the right a little bit and we see this example here. We have the same amounts here, but we have one more person, Jack, and Jack is not having any amount, and they left actually that data point empty. So we want to see how all these functions work when it's actually working within a data set that's having an empty cell. Equals to average, tab to select it, highlight, tab. You can see we are getting 15. That means the average function is actually ignoring that empty cells. So let's do the average A again, equals to average A with an A, tab to select it, highlight. When I hit tab, you can see we are also getting the same amount. That means the average A also ignores an empty cell. So let's see the aggregate, equals to aggregate, tab to select it, 1 for the function number, comma. This time around we are ignoring also nothing, so tab to select that one also, comma, then the reference I'm going to highlight. When I hit tab, you can see also getting the same result. So let's see the database function, the DAVERAGE equals to DAVERAGE, tab to select it. This is our database, comma, the field. In the previous example we actually typed the name of the field in quotes, but this time around I'm going to write 2 to show the DAVERAGE function that we want the second field, then comma, the criteria, still the field name on top, then nothing below it, close parentheses, and when I hit enter, you can see all these Excel functions actually do ignore empty cells. We have this example here, and you can see that instead of an empty cell, we are having an NA error. So I'm going to start, click here, equals to average, tab to select it, highlight. And when you hit tab, you can see when there is an error within your data set, the average function always results into an error. So let's see average A equals to average, tab to select it. I'm going to highlight this. When I hit tab, you can see the average A function also delivers an error when there is an error within your data set. Now let's see aggregate equals to aggregate, tab to select it, scroll this one here. Now the function number is 1, comma. Now this time around, since we are having an error, we can clearly see that we are having an NA error. We are going to go to option number 6 that says ignore errors. So I'm going to double click and it will automatically put for me option 6 there. That means you are going to ignore that error, comma, and then the reference is this. And when I hit enter, you can see for this case it's working actually because we have told the aggregate function to ignore errors. So if you're having an error within your dataset but you still want to get the mean of that dataset, then you need to use the aggregate function to get the mean. So let's see also the DAVERAGE, whether it will work. Click, equals to DAVERAGE, tab to select it. This is our database, comma, the field is 1, 2, we want the second field, comma, then the criteria, field name, then the criteria below, or an empty cell if you want the entire column. When I hit enter, you can see all these other 3 functions are actually giving us an error. It's only the aggregate function that's working for this particular case here. Now let's get to this. I'm going to scroll to the right. Now we have this example again. Instead of any error, we're having 0. Click. Let's start with the average function, tab, highlight, tab. For this particular case, you can see that the average function is actually counting even that 0. Equals to average A, tab to select it. I'm going to highlight this, tab. You can see even the average A also do not ignore 0. So let's see the aggregate function, equals to aggregate, tab, function number 1, comma. This time around we are not seeing anything we can ignore. Let's just do ignore nothing, double click, and then comma, highlight, tab. Let's see the D average tab. Database is this, comma, fill is fill number 2, comma, and then the criteria is this. Enter. Now you can see all these functions actually do consider zeros. What if you have a text? So let's also see what happens if you have a text within your data set. Let's come here, instead of 0, let's just type anything. I'm going to say WWD, and when I hit enter, now you can see that when you have a text within your data set, the average function actually ignores the text. The average A functions actually do consider the text, and then the aggregate function do ignores also the text, and then the D average functions also ignores the text. So if you have a text within your data set and you want to get the average of that data set, then you need to use the average A function. Now this is also the hotel room price per night example we saw last video. Let's just do that quick. I'm actually just going to see the average function, highlight, tab. That was the same mean we got last video. Let's also do the average A function just to prove it, highlight, tab. Now let me also do this one, equals to average, tab, highlight it, then you hit enter. Now there's also something that the average A function does that the rest of the functions actually doesn't do. The average A function treats trues as 1 and false as 0. Let's prove that. I'm just going to do some logical test here. So I'm going to click on this cell G15 equals to, let's just see if this price is actually greater than or equals to the mean. Now I'm going to hit the F4 key to lock it so that when I move this formula down, this cell reference will keep moving down while this one is locked on G12. So when I hit enter, you can see that for this particular case it's true. This is actually greater than the mean of 110. So let me click here, then I copy my formula down. Then you can see that this is actually a small data set. We can simply see that there are 5 trues and there are also 5 falses. So let's see how the average A function actually treats this logical test. Click here, equals to average A. Now the average A, when I highlight this, you can see when I hit enter, it's actually giving me a half or 0.5. How exactly is it getting the 0.5? It's getting the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 divided by the total count of this. That means it's actually considering all the truths you are seeing here as 1 and then the false as 0. So when it comes to counting, it's counting this entire range here and it's getting a count of 10. But for the case of truths, it's counting this one as 1. This is another one, that is 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it's now getting 5 divided by 10. That's why it's getting half. Let's see. Equals to when you get 5 divided by 10, you get 0.5. So it's showing us that 50% of these values here, it's actually true. Or the half of these values here is true. If I'm to do this using the average function, equals to average, tab, highlight the range, and when I hit tab, you can see I'm getting a divide by 0 error. And it's the same thing for the aggregate function. For the aggregate function, I'm ignoring nothing. And also for the average, it's also giving me a divide by 0 error. And that's actually a very common way of getting percentage. Now, if I'm to come to this $250 and change it to $90, when I hit enter, you can automatically see that we are now having only 4 truths and 6 falses. That's why the average A function is now telling us that 40% of these hotel room prices are now greater than the mean. Yeah, that is it about calculating the mean or the average in Excel. If you haven't subscribed, please do subscribe. And if you found this video interesting, give it a like and then share it with your friends. This is a video where we talked about the measures of central tendency, the mean, the median, and the mode. If you haven't watched it, please click on it, then you go and watch it. Until next video, WWD 5, then we meet again. Thank you.